Hello, UPSC aspirants. I bring to you a wonderful course in ethics. Now, what is ethics? As a subject, ethics is a little complex. Why? Because it's not just a subject, it is a compilation of many topics and subjects. So, in that, we have political science, we have thinkers from political science, we have psychology in ethics, and also we have the part of administration in ethics. Plus, ethics is about a very practical subject, it's about the real life situations also. So, ethics is a combination of subjects. It's a combination of subjects and it helps and it is the most relevant subject. It is the most relevant subject in UPSC preparation. So let's take ethics as a course. And one of the most beautiful things about ethics is that it will help us to think about the real life problems in administration as well as in our own personal lives. So, as a subject, ethics helps us to explore ourselves. So it's not the exploration that we go about in nature, it's the exploration that we go into our inner mind and our maybe our soul also when we are studying these subject. So we'll study the subject of ethics in a very practical manner, and I'll show you how we can make a template and study the topics of ethics in a very systematic manner. So let's get started. So before reading the definition of ethics, as a general, everybody knows that ethics analyzes some kind of problems. So there are many ethical problems in our life, and we can see it from different perspectives. So let's see what are the component of the problem and which type of problem ethics analyzes. So uh, the problem which ethics analyzes, so will break into a model of moral decision making. So the first is that in every ethical problem, in any situation, there will be a moral agent. That moral agent, when we are doing case studies, is mostly us, because us as a part of the administration is trying to solve some problem, or there can be other stakeholder also which are the part which are doing some actions and we have to react to that, or we have to in some way um, recognize their mistakes, or we have to help them. So there are many, so mostly when we do the case studies which are asked in the UPSC mains examinations, we are the moral agent. And there are some other stakeholders also. So we all can be moral agent and we can analyze the problem from each stakeholder's perspective. So first, we are a moral agent. Second, there as a moral agent we are doing some actions, and that actions determines our conduct. So we have to read about conduct also. Can we predict conduct? Is it predictable in any manner? So that can also be analyzed, and it is one of our topics in ethics that is given in the UPSC syllabus. And the next thing is that whether that action is morally right or wrong, that we have to break down in the case studies. So, how can we judge whether an action is morally wrong or right? So, there has to be some moral standard for that kind of judgment. So, we'll study about various moral standards. Are should we take the sayings of the old thinkers and philosophers for moral standards, or there should be the standards of our society, or there should be some code of conduct that is given to the civil servants, or what are the modern moral standards that can be there. So we are for example, if you watch a lot of good stuff nowadays, there is a woke culture, and woke culture is very liberal. It's very liberal. So can that be a moral standard? So we'll see whether that can be or not. And what is the source of standard? So we have to read about various sources of standard. Is it our ancient texts, our Vedas, our Ramayana, our Mahabharata, or there are some religious text, or there is some law written, or there is some code of conduct, or there is some corporate ethics? So are these the sources of standard and if they are, so should we read them in detail and what they entails. So basically this is how we'll study ethics. So this is a very important model, that as an agent, first we have to know ourselves. As an agent, we have to first know ourselves. And then we have to see whether our conduct is voluntary or not. Then, whatever action we are doing, we have to see whether the action is morally wrong or right. And that is called judgment. And judgment is based on some kind of moral standard. And for a moral standard, it doesn't stand in isolation. There is some source of standard. So we have to look into that. So now we have seen that basically in ethics, what we are going to study is about agent, and then about moral standards, about sources of moral standards, whether the moral standards are subjective or objective. So this is a very important point, that moral standards can be subjective, that okay, we say that it's okay for you, but it's not okay for me, or there is no universal concept, or everything is relative. So we have to study about that. The next thing is moral standard, which we are taking as a judgment for an action. Is it based on some intellectual analysis? So for a moral standard, is there some logical, is there some logic, or it is based on innate moral sense? Moral standard, see, when we are saying moral standard is subjective or objective, so we in a way mean the same thing, that whether moral standards are absolute or universal, and whether these moral standards are amenable to logical analysis, that whether you can use logic, you can use your knowledge to, you can use the reasoning. See, reasoning is very important. Reasoning is the primary function of man. So basically ethics primarily deals with reasoning. Are we able to reason our actions? Are we able to reflect on them, or just it is an intuition that we feel, or it is a feeling that we feel that something is right or wrong? So we have to analyze that thing, that whether the situations, the moral standards that are prevalent, are they logic based, or are they some kind of feeling or emotions? So let's see the syllabus of ethics. So first of all, the first topic in our ethics paper is it's ethics and human interface. So um, ethics, as we see, the centrality in ethics is about humans. So humans acts as an agents, and as an agents, they have a system in themselves. They have some values, they have some conscience, they have some circumstances. So we have to study about the agent, and the first topic is about that, and the second is the about the human values. So what are the primary values? It comes in our agent only, and then what is the kind of attitude and what is the aptitude of the agent. So these are all the parts of the psychology. What is the emotional intelligence of the agent? Then we come to the sources of ethics. So the sources of ethics, as we see, these are the contribution of moral thinkers and philosophers from India and the world. And uh, the next is the public or the civil service values and ethics in administration. And if we go into the international relations and corporate governance, there are some code of conduct, or there are some values and principles that must be followed by organizations. And the very important topic is about the probity in governance, and how the governance has to be conducted. What are its standards? And the last is code of ethics and citizen charters. So these all come basically under the sources and the standards of ethics. So this is how we distribute the syllabus. See, whenever we are asked about any moral agent, then we'll have to think our answers from the standpoint of human values, his attitude, what is his aptitude, and what is the emotional intelligence of that person. And whenever there is a situation and we can see if there is guidance in these moral standards that are given. So our sources could be philosophers, our sources could be public or civil service values. In international relation, there must be some uh, ethics, and in corporate governance also there are some rules or standards without which the businesses can uh, go into a drive for profit that can really harm people, that can really harm consumers. So for that we have regulation, and for that also there is a lot of corporate governance and ethics issues are evolving. And the next is probity in governance, and this is the core topic in administration. So we learn about how the public service is conducted and what are the values of it. And the last topic is the code of ethics, that how the code of ethics helps us in studying and solving the case studies. So common definition of ethics is, if we see, is that ethics are norms or standards of right and wrong, and they are used to judge actions. So this is the most common definition. These are the norms and standards, and the most important thing is that these are used to judge actions. So at the very start, when we started our discussion about ethics, we saw that ethics is about moral problems which men face. And what are the moral problems? There must be some agent and he must be doing something. So we are trying to analyze his conduct. So we are trying to analyze his conduct, whether his conduct is right or wrong, or he is doing some bad things. And here conduct means moral conduct only. And the next definition that we can give of ethics is, there can be multiple definition of ethics. So the next definition is, ethics gives systematic account of our judgment, and from the standpoint of right, wrong, good or bad. So the most important thing in ethics is, it is about a agent, his action, and there should be some judgment about that action. And that judgment is either right, is wrong, good or bad, or it must be a very good action. So how do we judge these things? So basically, whatever judgment there is in ethics, it takes two forms. The first, it is about the conduct, that how the conduct of an agent is. And conduct is revealed in individual acts or events. So whenever there is something happening, so people will react in certain manner. For example, if there is disaster is happening, so there are two kinds of situation. People act in two kind of ways. First, in case of disaster, everybody responds very well. People send help. People send help from other nations also. People try to save each other. Some people try to sacrifice their own life to help others. So that is one kind of conduct. And at the same time of the disasters, some try to loot people. So there is robbery. So people engage in frauding others. So for simple services, they will charge more, so that for the relief. So there are two kind of conducts in any type of situation. So the first is that these kinds of conduct are judged in ethics. And the second is that standards of or norms appropriate for morally evaluating human motives and ends. So something, the immediate action we do, it is about conduct and we can easily judge it. But how we judge it, it's based on some standards or norms that are appropriate for morally evaluating human motives and ends. Now, what are human ends? What are human motives? So whenever somebody is helping in case of disaster, so his ultimate motive is serving mankind, helping people. So it satisfied his conscience. And what is his end? It is a satisfaction of his own soul. Apart from helping people, apart from providing help to people, there is some inner motive. And what is the ends in case of one who is stealing from people in that kind of natural disaster? So he wants some material comfort, some material comfort. So that these are the two kinds of judgment we do. So one another example that we can take is that during the protest, so even if the demands are legitimate, so their here intention or motive is good, maybe they want to benefit some entire their community, maybe they want independence from a very brutal rule, or maybe they might be protesting against some dictator, or maybe they might be just upset about some small policy of the government. But is it right to turn violent and destroy property? So these kind of conduct is revealed in individual acts or events. And if we see the other side of it, if somebody steals and he lives in this kind of locality, which is very difficult to live, so people are very poor, they don't have the necessities of life. So what are the norms or standards in these kind of the situation? So he may not get his next meal. So can we say that because it is a very basic necessity, so stealing is justified in these kind of situation? So we'll see that how these things unfold. So first we have learned about judgment, that we judge a conduct or individual acts or events, and how we judge is according to some standards or norms that are appropriate for morally evaluating human motives and ends. So we can see these two examples of violent protest and stealing in case of chronic. Now there are two aspects of morals. First is about an action or intention, and the second is how or why an act is done. So basically, evaluating anything morally, so there must be some action that must be done. So the action could be either you are speaking something in public, or you are taking a big decision that affects, or you are physically acting. For example, police, if they are arresting or doing lathi charge, so that is a kind of action, and what is the intention behind it, and how or why an act is done. So if we see, the action is matter and content of the moral. So uh, the matter and why we are saying that action or intention is the matter and content of the moral is because it is very we can see that it's not an abstract thing. So some action is done. For example, a very big businessman, uh, he frauds and he manipulates the record of his company. So in that way, we can see that there is some action on this. Now, how or why an act is done is a form or attitude of the moral. So that act is done, the intention is not only defrauding, is the intention is not only frauding, but there is some form or attitude of that moral, that he believes that getting rich is very important, even important than the good functioning of his company or his own character, or there is no conscience involved in this case. So here we are seeing form or attitude of the moral, and this point is about the matter and content of the moral. So, for example, in case of action, we can say that live in peace with your neighbors. So, living in peace with your neighbors, you might have to perform some actions, or you might have to refrain yourself from performing certain kind of actions. For example, in living in peace with your neighbors, either you should speak to him very politely, or you should not fight with him. Tell the truth. So, in case of telling the truth, you must tell the truth. What is the exact thing? In this case, even inaction cannot be taken, because inaction would be hiding the truth. And similarly, one kind of dictum can be that aim at the greatest happiness of the greatest number. So, for achieving the greatest happiness of the greatest number, we have to perform certain kind of actions so that everybody could be happy. And when we talk about form or attitude of the moral, so it is something abstract, but it is necessary before we take an action. So before we take an action, it is necessary that there should be some form of the moral, and it should be about the conscience, that in your conscience you should have good values. So the first is be conscientious, be pure in heart. So what action can tell you that you are pure in heart? You might or you might not be able to express, but there is some form in that, there is some quality. So we have seen two aspects of moral: action or intention. So there is further division of an action, and how or why is an act is done is also subdivided into two things. So first, let us see about what kind of actions we are talking about. We already know that action is about the matter and the content, and how or why an act is done, that is the logic behind an act, is the form or attitude of the moral. So in kind of actions, the matter is of higher and lower within man's own self and his treatment of others. So when you perform any action, so it can be based on the higher and lower ends of the man itself. For example, I told you about people helping in case of disasters. So there are two things in that involved. So when a person provides relief to others, it leads to the contentment of his own soul. So he is doing something for his own soul, and in his treatment of others, he is providing relief to them also. So, whenever a agent perform an action, there is something which is related to himself, his inner self, and there is something which is related to his treatment of others. For example, if some bureaucrat is embezzling money, so here in this case, if we see the higher and lower within man's own self. So if he's acting against corruption, if he is acting against corruption, so he is showing the courage. He is showing the courage stopping the corruption. And if he is into the corruption, then he shows that he has degraded values. If he is into the corruption, he shows that he has degraded values. And the same action of stopping the embezzlement of funds and showing the courage, it also involves his treatment of others, because he's saving money and that money is public money, which is for the welfare of the people. And similarly, when he takes up the money, so he is harming the people for whom that welfare money has come. And how or why an act is done, it contains two forms. And the right. So we have seen about action and intention. So the first thing is about that is when we in any action, when we look into ourselves, our higher and lower within man's own self, so there is a contrast between a life of spirit to the life of flesh. So, whenever we are doing something for our own material ends, in case of corruption, maybe, so then we are tending to a life of flesh. We want to show off our riches. We want to be extra secure from the standpoint of the money. So, it's not a good thing. But if somebody is showing courage, then he is living the life of the spirit. And also, he is doing his duty and sincerity, which is all about the life of spirit. So we can say that a fine man who is very built up, whose morals are very good, and who is very well educated, and not only educated in the formal sense, he has imbibed the values of the education. So he'll become a finer person, and a coarser person is those who get through the things, but still they are embezzling fund, they are doing corruption, they are showing off. So these kinds of personality can be called a coarser personality, nobler to the baser. So base instincts are very, we can say, primitive instincts. So accumulation, aggression, preservation. These are the kind of the base instincts. But through the evolution of man, we have become noble. So we have seen soldier that they gave life to nation and happily. They give life to nation happily. People sacrifice themselves, their own interest for others, for helping others. So these are the nobler ends. So this contrasts the life of spirit to the life of flesh. So let's see that what are the higher and lower within own selves, and do we really see them in today's world? So if we take the example of Baba Amte, he devoted his entire life to the India's poorest and the least powerful, and even towards the animal and those animal which no one would look upon. For example, there were some tribal people in the jungles where Baba Amte used to live, and they used to eat monkeys. So he asked them to give such ways, and not only he just asked them, he gave them ways so that they can live a good life, a life that is filled with empathy. And one such example is of Bejwada Wilson. So he campaigns against manual scavenging. He could have earned a lot of money going into any other sector. He was so educated, but he devoted his time. So activism needs time, and activism needs ruffling your feathers with the powerful, ruffling your feathers with the powerful. So uh, that kind of activity needs your personal commitment and devotion. So these are the kind of higher self that one is realizing in these kind of activities. And the next we can take uh, Madam Tulsi Gowda. She is known for her immense contribution towards the conservation of trees. So she is planting an entire forest. She is looking after them. So it shows her duty towards the mother nature. It shows her sincerity towards the fellow beings. So these are the finer and the nobler people, and we say the coarser and the baser people. So we can see the example of Hitler. Why we are saying that he is the coarser and the baser? Because he is very aggressive, and he's doing everything. So he's doing a propaganda, and in case of his propaganda, everything is based on a lie which he makes other understand as a truth, and he wants people to worship him, he wants people to follow him. So we can take the example of Hitler in the baser and the coarser people. Another is, you can take any dictator, but another is one of the most um, very cruel dictator in the history. He's a Cambodian dictator, Pol Pot. So in his reign, there were rivers of blood because um, he conducted so much genocide. So these are very base instinct. Even animal would not do so. So it goes beyond a very low quality of men. So now the thing is, why is there a contrast in higher and lower within man's own self? So there was one Ravan, and there is Ram. So how can we transform from Ravan to Ram? So the point is that there is aggression in men. Um, there is a quest for self-preservation in men, and as a natural instinct, we do want to procreate and we want to expand in number. So these are the natural and the basis instinct, but we do evolve. So what do we do? So these survival instinct will always be there in man. So if these survival instincts are not there, men would perish, and we won't be able to live without these spirit, because it cannot happen that if anybody comes and hit us many times, then we don't stop him. If he doesn't stop, then we'll collapse. So these there are some instincts that are very baser in man, but that should not come and become the dominant instincts of the men. Survival instincts should not be the dominant instincts. Your every act should not be based on the survival instincts. And if we base our lives basis on the survival instinct, we won't be able to achieve growth. So we will always be in aggression and friction with others, and in that way we will lose all our energy. So to achieve our full potential, we have to move beyond our lower self. We have to control our impulses and passions. We have to find a mental and moral discipline, and we have to pursue higher ideal and interest. So that is what is explained in our old scriptures, that there was a aggression in Ravan. He captured the Lanka from his brother Kuber, and he wanted to expand his kingdom. So there was a instinct of preservation in him, and he abducted women, so for the purpose of procreation. So these survival instincts became the dominant instinct in Ravan. But in contrast to that, if we talk of Lord Ram, so he readily gave up his empire for the wishes of one of his mothers. So he was able to control his impulses and passions. That's why he was called Maryada Purushottam. So, uh, so there is a contrast because these are the survival instincts, but we do have the potential to go into the higher selves by controlling impulses and passions, by mental and moral disciplines, and by pursuing higher ideals and interests. Now, whenever we see about action or intention, so in treatment of others, there are some values that we come across. So the first is justice. There should be kindness, and there should be a Christian golden rule in our treatment of others. What is the Christian golden rule? Behave towards other as you would like them to behave towards you. So we don't want to be treated in a way that we won't treat others. So, and in contrast to these other regarding behavior, if we see the negative side of them, first you can be, there should be a strong sense of justice in you. If that is not, you will do injustice to people. If you are not kind to people, you will be cruel to them. And if you will not follow the Christian dictum that behave towards others as you would like them to behave towards you, then there will be a selfishness filled within you. There will be a selfishness filled within you. So that justice, kindness, and behaving towards other as they would behave towards us, these are some of the virtues, and these are the good habits. They give us the disposition to perform good actions. So these are the values that will help us in behaving good, and that will be our actions. And the vices are the evil habits that give us disposition to perform evil actions. So, guys, this was a very basic discussion that we did today in our ethics. This was just a warm up class, and I intend to bring to you the entire ethics course that is required for the UPSC in the simplest and the most interesting manner. So, do like this video, comment on this video, share this video to other aspirants, and subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon. Thank you very much for discussion.